Welcome, colleagues, to the final session of RIDE, of the first day of RIDE, that is. We'll be hearing from Jonathan Baldwin. Jonathan is Managing Director for Higher Education at JISC. John will say a little bit about what JISC is. Previously, he had 6 years as Managing Director for Higher Education at the Tribal Group. Before that, his roles included Registrar Secretary at Warwick University, at UMIST, and as DVC at Murdoch in Western Australia. John's presentation, Learning and Teaching Reimagined, The Student View, draws on JISC's Learning and Teaching Reimagined programme, which ran May to November last year, and particularly the student view of blended learning and distance learning, which was captured with an associated JISC survey. Please use the chat function to raise comments with each other, but I also hope there'll be questions which you would like me to put to John for the final 10-minute session starting at noon. So please use the Q&A button, which is down at the bottom of your Zoom webinar bar, for questions which you would like me to put to John. I'll put as many as I can. John, warm welcome, and over to you.
David, thank you ever so much for that. Colleagues, it's very nice to join you, and thanks to Linda and colleagues for the invitation. Great. So yes, as David says, I want to just step through some of the work we did through our Learning and Teaching Reimagined project, but with a particular emphasis on what we were hearing from students here in the UK. I am conscious we've got a very international audience, and it's nice to see you all here. For those who are unaware, JISC is the National Research and Education Network, the NREN for the UK. We work with all UK universities, supply the backbone infrastructure, the Janet network.ac.uk, the connectivity around it, the resilience, the cyber security, alongside work to provide digital content for universities by brokering deals with all of the big publishers. And also we have a very strong sort of thought leadership element to our work, which is where Learning and Teaching Reimagined originates. Learning Teaching Reimagined, as David said, ran from May through November last year. We facilitated it alongside partners Universities UK, Advance HE and Emerge Education. It was steered by a group of 14 Vice-Chancellors. It reached over 1,000 university stakeholders, students, academic staff, professional staff, through webinars, focus groups, audience participation surveys. So the sense we had was there was a reliability to the evidence we were collecting. The focus of the project was to look at what was happening then, remember right in the teeth of the pandemic, May last year, look at how universities were preparing for the academic year that is now concluding, but perhaps most importantly, look out 10 years, look to 2030 and see what the future of learning and teaching of pedagogy might look like 10 years on from the pandemic. The report was issued Wednesday, 4th November, in a webinar where we had 3 of those Vice-Chancellors speak, Learning and Teaching Reimagined, a new dawn for higher education. And there were essentially 7 challenges articulated in the report. I'll just quickly skim them. Embedding digital at the heart of university culture, investing, thinking short but looking long, exploring new models, embracing blended in curriculum redesign, we'll come back to that, focusing on and expanding the digital skills and confidence of students and staff, and relentlessly communicating the benefits of blended learning. And I know you've been reflecting on this earlier today, but strengthening the response to digital poverty, which is clearly an issue as we look to different mechanisms for curriculum delivery. So nothing surprising there, but 7 core challenges that in a sense shaped 9 recommendations, which I won't go through in detail. But the recommendations were ranging from encouraging universities to use their strategic and structural planning processes to really try and effect the digital transformation that was proving to be necessary. Number 4, thinking radically, not always easy for universities to think or act radically given the way power is distributed, the way collegiality and collegial systems work. Accelerating the adoption of blended learning, and you'll see why when I come to the student view. Clearly focusing on inclusivity and accessibility, and number 9 there, pointing at government and funding agencies to ensure that steps are taken to reduce digital poverty as a barrier. And number 7, reflecting that everyone needed to grow confidence, to upskill. The idea that, you know, all students, young students, were digital natives is not true. The idea that all staff are resistant to the use of technology is also not true. So thinking carefully and cleverly about those elements of digital blended distance delivery. As we reached the end of the project in November, we realized we had a number of challenges before us. And this is a slide we put together drawing on work of organizations like Gartner, like Educause, and indeed the consultants at Accenture. But it seemed to capture quite well, what the challenges were. So if you're a user, how do we bring joy and serendipity from the real world to the screen? And how do we redesign infrastructure to help people from beginning to end? In technological terms, you know, how do you redesign? How do you increase adaptation in the context of more personal adaptive learning models? And for the sector, how do we shape a compelling offer? How do we support the complexity of real cultural change? And so we picked up these challenges alongside the recommendations and released in March Powering UK Higher Education, essentially JISC's higher education strategy for the next 3 years. That's got 4 themes: empowering culture and leadership, reimagining learning, teaching and assessment, reframing the student experience, transforming infrastructure. As part of this, we engaged with a number of international colleagues. We ran a series, we are running indeed, a series of roundtable sessions, PVC's learning and teaching from the UK with DVC's education in Australia, reflecting on responses to the pandemic and how you embed changing cultures in that context. We've done the same with North American colleagues through Educause, providing a richness of inputs to the work that we're undertaking. Just yesterday, I was interviewed by colleagues at SURF in the Netherlands, the NREN in the Netherlands, about the challenges they're facing there and how they might make good use of actually a very significant fund the Dutch government are putting together to work through educational challenges post-pandemic. And we've had visits from other countries, Finland, Ireland. So the international dimension has been strong. I just wanted to also nod at the Office for Students report in England, Gravity Assist, the piece of work undertaken by Sir Michael Barber under the auspices of OFS, which set out these 6 actions that every university or college leader should consider ahead of the forthcoming academic year. And as you look at them, making the environment safe, equipping staff with the right skills, planning how to seize opportunity for the long term, if I flick back, you see the symmetry and synergy with the recommendations in our LTR support and so on. So David, it's a bit of a long introduction, but important, I think, to just set the work in context. What I've now got are just 4 closing slides, which reflect on what students were telling us and which we've shared with our members. This is a survey of 22,000 students. Well, sorry, we had 22,000 responses to our Digital Experience Insights survey back in February. So it's a little bit old, but still, I think, usable. And we're running another survey in a couple of weeks. So what students were telling us, and there's nothing sort of earth-shattering, but it's interesting to see. Look, online lectures are just not the same. It's difficult when you're staring at a screen for 8 hours a day. You guys on this conference will be wanting a break as you approach lunchtime on day one of this conference. It's natural. Can you give us better guidance on how best to engage? You know, trying to teach a couple of hundred students in any environment's not easy. It's perhaps even more difficult online. So can we think about techniques like bubble groups and so on? And please, you know, create support networks, make online more of a social experience with fluid communication during classes. We're doing some work with a university as they develop their digital strategy. And when we were talking to students said to us, you know, we really miss lectures. And that kind of puzzled us and interested us. So we dug into that a bit more deeply. And it turned out what students were really saying is not that they missed the lecture per se, but they missed everything that goes on around the lecture. That mingling with colleagues and peers as you go in, the sharing of how you've approached your assessment, clarifying what the tutor was requesting, the fun that goes into discussing last night's sport or television or theatre, whatever it might be. Positively, recordings, big difference. Being able to watch and revisit an academic lecture and intervention as many times as they would like, at the pace you would like, slower, faster, really helpful. Being able to stop, pause, to think, improving the quality of the notes that you take from that session, the ability to catch up, really important. And also, and I guess, you know, straightforwardly, helpful for students for whom English is not their first language. And it can be easier to hear on a recording of a lecture than it can in a large, sort of cavernous lecture theatre with poor acoustics and less distraction. Also telling us in positive terms that live sessions were more interactive than pre-records because they got the opportunity for questions and responses. A perception that online is better because of things like flexibility and convenience. I mean, we fall into traps, don't we, often of assuming a homogenous student cohort of young people leaving school or college and coming into higher education, living and learning together. Well, it's clearly not like that. Those students who have got work, have got family, have got caring commitments, have found much to be positive in a blended environment, as indeed have students with a disability who suddenly have got better access to things that they've been campaigning and arguing for many, many years. Learning from peers and with peers is important, but there was real appreciation, and let me reinforce that to everyone, real appreciation for the efforts that university colleagues, academic and support made to get things working through a crisis and beyond over the last 12, 15 months. More negatively, difficulty accessing lectures and online resources. Sometimes the timeliness and the scheduling and the timetabling's not been friendly, not been thought through well enough. A sense that, you know, this is hard. It can feel overwhelming. It feels like we're being asked perhaps to do too much larger volume of independent work than before, but not the support networks easily available like they used to be. Concentration, a challenge. Screen time is fatiguing. I mean, I don't know about you, but in the early days of the pandemic, I was kind of exhausted at 8 o'clock from a relentless round of engagements on screen. I think my body and mind has got used to that. I'm not sure that's a good thing, but exhaustion was a real problem. and communication, and potential isolation and loneliness. Learning is a social as well as a personal experience. I don't think the technology's cracked that yet. So what next? As a final slide, David, colleagues, look, we get the basics right. Access to reliable hardware, clear navigation tools, better timetabling and scheduling, etc. Interactivity, quizzes, games, small group tasks, recording, developing and supporting academics to use the tools in a pedagogically sound and inclusive way. Of course, pace, reflect on that, create opportunities to talk, to ask questions, and offer timely feedback. I'll stop there, David. I think I'm in time. I hope I'm in time.
You are absolutely in
time. We've got some time for questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jonathan. That was a terrific overview and obviously a piece of work that obviously dug very deep. I'm going to abuse my chair's position, as chairs do, by asking the first question. There's an old joke about learning technology, which says that learning technology is a way of doing the wrong things better. Can you talk to us about some of the right things which have emerged from that work?
David, it's a nice comment, and I think frames the technology challenge well, in the sense that I don't think any of the changes should be driven by technology, but they should be facilitated and aided by the technology. Having said that, the emergency pivot was really rather spectacular and commendable. That the fact that universities were able to bring their teaching, their sessions online so quickly and allow the learning process, the assessment process, the graduation process to continue was terrific. Where we've seen real positive developments is early on there was a sort of translation of PowerPoint provision, PowerPoint slides, simply to online delivery, and often there were links in those slides that were taking the learner, the student, to places where they needed high-end technology to get the benefit from it. And remember that we're dealing with students in large part who are mobile and flexible. They're perhaps working in houses of multiple occupation. They're perhaps sharing that learning space with younger brothers and sisters or their own children. And it wasn't working for them. They couldn't get the access. So quickly, a number of far-sighted academics and institutions found new ways of delivering that learning that didn't demand the receiving end high-end technology. So it was using sort of WhatsApp chat facilities. It was using low-resolution materials that you could get on your phone, in your bedroom, away from the messiness of the rest of the house or the environment you were in. And the connection with the student, therefore, never mind the quality of the materials, was maintained and often enhanced. And also using the team and small group facilities on functionality like Teams and Zoom meant that you were taking students away from those larger events, putting them in smaller classrooms and allowing the informal interaction through kind of fairly low resolution, ubiquitous tools that the students were really missing. So it's a couple of quick answers, not digging too deeply into some of the more inventive uses of the tech, but they were reaching large numbers quite quickly, David.
No, that's fascinating and useful. So there is some rethinking of educational process going on. Your comments about access obviously refer back very strongly to some of the comments in the opening keynote about the fact that access is a complicated issue and we've got to think about access to what and so on. You pick that one up. There's in the Q&A, there's a comment from somebody who's unfortunately anonymous. I say unfortunately because it's a great comment stroke question. I'm just going to read it to you, Jonathan, and see what responses it provokes, okay? They say, in our response to the pandemic, we struggled to attain a balance between synchronous and asynchronous time zones, and our places international courses became a challenge. The range of flexibility within an academic year put pressure on us. There's a sense of burnout for educators. Is any of that captured anywhere in the work you did?
Oh, they're great points, aren't they? They are great points. And you know, to add to that, the idea that somehow offering blended stroke distance learning is easy and less valuable than the traditional face-to-face provision is in the middle of that, isn't it? You know, the popular narrative that online is bad and, you know, in face-to-face is good needs challenging. It is captured. It's an interesting set of observations. What was clear from the work we did was how grateful students were for the efforts that colleagues have made to deliver the best quality education they could, and do that in conjunction with consultation with their students. What was also clear though, and this is where it gets hard, was that there was a sort of understanding and acceptance that that was an emergency response, David. And therefore, there was an expectation or an anticipation that in the academic year we're now in, and certainly beyond, the way in which blended learning was delivered needed to be better, needed to be improved. And I chaired a podcast with a few VCs, vice chancellors, about a month ago, where we were reflecting on this. And Sir Chris Husbands, who's the VC of Sheffield Hallam University in England, made a very straightforward, but I thought quite profound comment. He said, John, I used to think we knew our students very well. It turns out we're going to have to get to know them a whole lot better. And I think whilst everyone accepts and understands that sense of burnout, that sense of exhaustion, the pressures from the consumers, I try and use that word, not customer, are only going to grow and develop. And therefore, all of the things that we said in our report about upskilling, about development, about investment have got to be taken seriously, David.
Getting to know the students does imply a new relationship with students, doesn't it? And that's going to take a while. So in summary, your students were saying, okay, thanks. We know it was tough. You did a great job, but now you need to do better. Now we all need to do better.
I feel
as
that
this becomes the new norm. Okay.
That's a fair summary, David. Yeah, it's a fair summary.
Linda asks whether anything emerged about ways of supporting staff to engage with these new approaches. It picks up on what we've just said.
Yes. In the PVC networks I referred to, and in particularly in the discussions with Australian colleagues, there was a fairly active discussion about the differences or how different students were responding to, e.g., group work on a distance basis. So one university, a British university actually, said, we've had real trouble when we put students into groups where they've not met each other before. A number of them are taking a big step back. They're not wanting to come on camera. They're perhaps even exempting themselves from that group activity. And in some really sort of challenging moments, one or two of them have withdrawn. Compare and contrast second and third year students who perhaps had met and, you know, were very happy to go back into peer group learning because they'd established relationships, personal and working, with students in those groups. So what we took from that was, can we use students who are, you know, in the second or third year of their student journey to share their experiences and, you know, positives and negatives from their first year group work that would help newer colleagues coming in with their integration, if you like, into the university environment. And we've not checked back on that through a session yet. We've actually got a session coming up in a couple of weeks, but the email chat around it, that has been tried and has proved to be popular. And that's helped the academics concerned mix and match some of the groups and bring, almost as mentors, some more experienced students into first year engagement activities.
That's terrific, because that is finding new right things to do, isn't it? That's reinventing the university for this new age. Your comments about the difficulties are picked up very much by a comment from Mohammed Al Nasir. And again, I'll read the comment simply. It's a comment rather than a question, but you may want to respond. Getting students to attend online classes has been a great challenge. Online learning has also opened up choices and options for students to engage in plagiarism and sourcing out the work. Teachers find that very debilitating. I'm sure you'll have picked up some of that in the study at least, but any ways of going beyond that?
Look, it's assessment, as we sort of travel around UK universities, assessment and assessment in this new order is on everyone's lips. There was some research in Australia just this week, which I think was facilitated by an organisation called Studiosity, who are a tutoring company with good traction in Australia and the UK, showed that incidences of cheating were indeed rising, more to the point the perception that others were cheating from colleagues in class was quite significant. We're about to commission a piece of work on that, David, which wants to try and dig a little bit deeper to see, you know, how some of the tools that are around proctoring or assessment generally can mitigate those risks, but also provide appropriate assessment environments that are properly built from and linked with the pedagogy, you know, and the learning and teaching that precedes them. So I think Mohammed makes a good point there. Attending classes, and a reluctance to show you're there, to turn your camera on for some of the reasons we've explored. I would just comment that, you know, attending classes in the real world is also often a challenge, David, and we shouldn't forget that either, should we?
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry we've ended on a bit of a downer there, but there are difficulties around, and you've obviously been addressing them. You've also given a very good cue introduction to tomorrow's session, which will be about assessment. So thank you very much, Jonathan. That was terrific. I appreciate your candor and your thoughtfulness about this. You're not saying we've got all the answers, but you are saying the questions are being seriously addressed, and that's almost all we can ever do. So that's all from RIDE 2021 for today. I hope everybody's brains are fizzing at least as much as mine is with all the ideas that have been piling in. I need to go and lie down now, I think. We will see you all, I hope, tomorrow afternoon, 1400 hours, 2 o'clock, British summertime, where, as I said, the theme will be redesigning assessment. Assessment's always the big one, isn't it? Linda, do you have any final comments to make before we close?
No, except to just thank everybody who's been involved this morning, our presenters and our audience and our chairs. Thank you very much. And particularly our technical support. 1 or 2 minor glitches, but we're working on it. Thank you very much, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Bye, everybody. Thank you.